or I'll drain every last ounce of his precious life.
The X-Men corner of the Marvel Universe features some of the most popular characters in Marvel Comics. Between the films and the classic X-Men cartoon, the biggest X-Men are household names with hardcore fans and casual fans alike. These heroes have been a prominent part of Marvel Comics, and we're living in a time when they're finally coming to the MCU as well. But the X-Men aren't all about Wolverine, Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Storm, you know. Over the years, Marvel has created countless X-Men characters that have flown under the radar like it's their superpower. Many of them do have incredible powers or plenty of potential for character development, but they remain underrated. Even in all the years of Marvel's cinematic history, many of these X-Men villains haven't seen the light of day. Often, it's because Marvel doesn't seem to spend time developing them, and most times they don't get any spotlight outside a handful of comics, which, again, don't gain a lot of traction. Moreover, the X-Men fanbase doesn't seem to care about some characters the way they do all the A-listers. With that being said, let's introduce you to 20 of the most underrated X-Men villains, which would make you want to dig deeper into their lore. Before we get into the list, however, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Shadow King. The Shadow King, who was originally known as Amal Farouk, is easily one of the X-Men's most dangerous yet criminally underrated villains. Unlike many physical threats the team often faces, the Shadow King operates on the astral plane, using his immense psychic powers to manipulate, possess, and corrupt minds across the world. He first appeared as a powerful telepath ruling the Cairo underworld, and his battle with a young Charles Xavier marked one of the Professor's earliest and most harrowing confrontations with evil. Over time, Farouk was revealed to be merely the first known host of a much older, more malevolent psychic entity that fed on hatred and fear, a literal parasite of consciousness that transcends all physical form. Plus, his villainy isn't just about domination, but really about corruption from the inside out. This guy has possessed numerous characters, including Karma of the New Mutants, and even Xavier's own son, Legion, turning their powers against their allies and sowing nothing but chaos within the X-Men's ranks. His ability to warp the astral plane into a nightmarish landscape and trap others in illusions or psychic prisons makes him quite the threat, something that no amount of strength or claws can fight. The Shadow King's most terrifying schemes often involve subtle manipulations like pushing mutants towards madness, inciting genocides, or triggering psychic wars where the victims don't even know they're being controlled. His role in major stories like the Muir Island Saga, where he possessed dozens of mutants to fight Xavier, or Legion Quest, where he influenced David Haller's fractured psyche, show how deeply he can fracture the world from behind the scenes. Despite his immense power and horrifying presence in the Marvel U, the Shadow King is often overlooked compared to more iconic villains like Magneto or Apocalypse, and perhaps it's because his battles are mostly internal, psychological, and far less visible. But that doesn't mean that they're any less devastating. Selene. So Selene is a member of the Hellfire Club, and as the Black Queen, she's one of the X-Men's fiercest enemies. She's also one of the most powerful characters because not only is Selene a mutant who can draw on the psychic energy of others, she's also one of the most powerful magic users in Marvel Comics. Despite her enormous power and her connection with the Hellfire Club, Selene is somewhat underrated as a villain. She hasn't quite risen to the prominence of Emma Frost, aka the White Queen, and is mostly a background player in the comics. But you should know that as an immortal mutant who predates civilization itself, Selene was born over 17,000 years ago and is a psychic vampire who sustains her life and power by draining the life force of others. She combines her mutant abilities with dark sorcery, which makes her one of the rare mutant sorceress hybrids. Her long life has made her cunning, manipulative, and utterly ruthless, playing the long game in ways most villains can't even comprehend. As a key member of the Hellfire Club, she often clashed with the X-Men by using politics, seduction, and fear rather than brute force. We think her most dangerous act came in the Necrotia storyline, where she raised an undead mutant army using the Technarch virus and attempted to become a literal goddess by sacrificing millions of souls. What makes Selene stand out isn't just her powers, which by the way include telekinesis, pyrokinesis, hypnosis, and immortality, but it's actually her sheer presence because she's regal, commanding, and terrifying in how she mixes gothic horror with high society. Unlike more prominent villains, Selene doesn't crave simple domination, but legit seeks godhood and eternal worship. She's a manipulative, ancient evil hiding behind elegance and decadence, and her schemes often destabilize mutant society from the inside out, making her one of the most quietly dangerous threats the X-Men have ever faced. Onslaught. So, Onslaught is one of the most catastrophic and psychologically complex villains in X-Men history, and he was born from the darkest aspects of both Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto. He was created when Xavier, in a moment of weakness, used his telepathy to shut down Magneto's mind after a brutal act of violence, and in the process, he unintentionally absorbed his rage, hatred, and extremist ideology. This fusion of Xavier's idealism and Magneto's aggression festered within Xavier's subconscious until it manifested as Onslaught, who turned out to be a sentient psionic entity with near limitless power. Onslaught wasn't just a pain in the ass for the X-Men, but he eventually became a threat to the entire Marvel Universe because he could wield telepathy, telekinesis, manipulate energy, and even had the ability to warp reality. His most infamous storyline saw him destroying some of Marvel's most powerful heroes and nearly destroying the world itself, requiring the sacrifice of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four to stop him. But you should know that Onslaught's character has a symbolic weight to it, as he represents the corruption of the dream, the idea that even the noblest intentions can become monstrous when you're being twisted by pain and pride. Unlike many villains, Onslaught forces heroes to question their beliefs, their leadership, and even their own inner darkness. Despite his overwhelming power and narrative impact, Onslaught is often underrated, perhaps because his origin is so tied to abstract concepts like ideology, guilt, and psychic trauma. Ironically, that's really what makes him such a terrifying antagonist. Spiral. Spiral is one of the most unsettling villains in the X-Men universe, and she's rather infamous for her mysticism, cybernetics, and raw insanity. Before becoming a villain, she was once a human woman named Rita Wayward, who was a stuntswoman and love interest of Longshot. But one day she was kidnapped and twisted into a six-armed, time-warping sorceress by the extra-dimensional tyrant Mojo. Through agonizing experimentation, she was transformed into Spiral, and that's how she became a master of both dark magic and advanced technology, with other abilities that include teleportation, body modification, time manipulation, and devastating martial arts combat. For Spiral, it's not just her grotesque visual design or skill set, but rather the tragic irony of her existence because she's a victim of mind control and torture who eventually became a tormentor herself. Often working for Mojo, she also leads Body Shop, where she surgically and mystically alters mutants into monstrous versions of themselves by stripping them of agency and identity. But Spiral is especially dangerous because she attacks on multiple fronts, including physical, magical, technological, and psychological, all with a theatrical flair and fractured mind. Despite her terrifying abilities and emotional depth, Spiral is often underrated, likely because she doesn't fit neatly into the usual villain archetypes because she's weaponized her trauma, which makes her unpredictable and deeply personal in her vendettas. Her clashes with the X-Men, especially Psylocke and Longshot, often cut deeper than simple hero-villain fights, making her one of the most emotionally charged and visually striking foes in their rogues gallery. Nimrod. As a next-generation sentinel from a dystopian future where mutants are nearly extinct, Nimrod is easily one of the most relentless foes the X-Men have ever faced. Unlike the clunky, easily outwitted sentinels of earlier eras, Nimrod is a highly advanced, adaptive, and nearly indestructible machine designed for one purpose, which is to hunt and eradicate mutants with absolute efficiency. He also possesses a staggering array of powers, including energy projection, teleportation, regeneration, shapeshifting, and the ability to instantly analyze and counter any mutant ability. What sets Nimrod apart is how he exerts both cold logic and strange hints of humanity, because we often see him speak with reason instead of rage, while also showing flashes of moral conflict, which really makes him more than just a mindless weapon. In classic storylines like Days of Future Past and Powers of X, Nimrod becomes the embodiment of mutant kind's greatest existential fear, which is a future where technology evolves to such a degree that resistance is futile. Despite his massive narrative implications often symbolizing the endgame of anti-mutant oppression, Nimrod's character is really not that famous, probably because he doesn't operate with emotion or ideology. That quiet, mechanical certainty makes him one of the most powerful villains in the X-Men mythos, especially in modern arcs where his return marks the beginning of the end. The Brood. The Brood are a terrifying alien species in Marvel Comics, best known for being a recurring nightmare for the X-Men and other Marvel heroes. Introduced in Uncanny X-Men issue 155 in 1982 by Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum as one of the X-Men's most dangerous threats, the Brood are insectoid parasites that implant their eggs inside living hosts, slowly transforming them into monstrous new brood drones against their will. Think Alien meets Starship Troopers, but with a psychic queen and a universal hunger for conquest. best. It really is like the Alien franchise had a crossover with Marvel, except that's already happened, and by the way, it's fantastic, check it out. Artist Dave Cockrum has stated that he designed the aliens as the most horrible-looking thing he could conceive, and rightly so, because the horror really does parallel the xenomorphs from Alien, which makes them impossible to ignore, especially considering the brood's reproductive process is even more terrifying, with the victim retaining their intelligence as their body mutates into a grotesque insectoid form. While the MCU is set to introduce the X-Men, the brood's sheer body horror and nightmarish design might make them a tough fit for the franchise's lighter tone. In fact, the brood's appearance in X-Men the Animated Series was so toned down that the monsters lost their mystique. Now, the X-Men's first major encounter with the brood happens during a cosmic adventure alongside the spacefaring Shi'ar Empire, where the team is captured and infected. This storyline, often called the Brood Saga, is one of the most intense arcs of the 1980s, as it forces the X-Men to deal with body horror, moral dilemmas, and the threat of losing their humanity entirely. Carol Danvers also plays a key role during this time as she transforms into the godlike Binary after her own traumatic run-in with the Brood. It was actually Wolverine's healing factor that famously prevented his full transformation, thus allowing him to save the rest of the X-Men. Plus, these insectoid nightmares aren't evil in the traditional sense, but are predators following their nature, which makes them harder to reason with and nearly impossible to stop. They represent the primal fear of infection, loss of self, and being consumed from the inside out. Executioner. The Executioner is a deadly and often overlooked vigilante villain in Marvel Comics, primarily known for targeting mutants he believes have escaped justice. First appearing in Uncanny X-Men 294 in 1992, we follow Carl Denti, a former FBI agent who becomes disillusioned with the legal system's inability to hold mutants accountable for their crimes. So, after discovering a hidden government cache of stolen alien and mutant hunting technology, he arms himself and makes it his job to execute mutants who, in his view, have gotten away with murder or worse. His most notable early storyline is during the Executioner's Song era, which was a massive X-Men crossover, though his solo mission begins more earnestly in his own arc shortly after, where he becomes a recurring antagonist across various X books. Carl Denti sees himself as a judge, jury, and executioner, often clashing with the X-Men not because he's anti-mutant in principle, but because he believes no one, human or mutant, should be above the law. This moral complexity makes him stand out more from cartoonishly evil mutant haters like Stryker or the Friends of Humanity. Carl Denti, as the Executioner, went after characters like Gambit, Archangel, and Forge by using a combination of high-tech weapons, tactical planning, and a relentless motivation to seek what he thought was justice. What makes the Executioner particularly dangerous is his obsessive preparation, as he studies his targets in depth and customizes his attacks to their specific weaknesses, often catching even seasoned X-Men off guard. However, the Executioner represents something much scarier on a personal level, because this is just a regular human using fear, judgment, and government tools to execute mutants under the guise of justice. Despite his chilling effectiveness and thematic relevance, especially in stories about justice versus revenge, he remains an underrated antagonist, occasionally resurfacing but never quite getting the spotlight he deserves. Strife! Strife is really dangerous, especially because of his deep-seated hatred of both mutants and humanity. He's also very connected to two of the franchise's most iconic characters, Cable and Apocalypse. First appearing in New Mutants issue 86 and then fully revealed in X-Force issue 1, Strife is actually a clone of Nathan Summers, aka Cable, who's the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. Strife was created by Apocalypse as a backup vessel for his essence. However, when the clone was deemed flawed, he was discarded, only to survive and grow into a powerful, vengeful character. Raised in the far future by the Ascani Sisterhood, Strife grew up believing that he was the real Nathan Summers, but when he discovered that he was merely a clone created to be a host for Apocalypse's consciousness, dude simply snapped. His life became defined by his vengeance against Apocalypse, against Cable, and against Cyclops and Jean, whom he blames for abandoning him. This existential crisis and hatred led Strife to become a tyrannical warlord in the future and a recurring threat to the present. His most infamous storyline is also Executioner's Song, where Strife frames Cable for the attempted assassination of Professor X, kidnaps Cyclops and Jean, and unleashes a deadly techno-organic virus as part of his plan to exact revenge. He's a master manipulator and a brilliant strategist who combines powerful telepathy, telekinesis, and advanced combat training with future technology. Unlike Cable, who's constantly suppressing the techno-organic virus in his body, Strife, being a pure, uninfected clone, actually has access to his full psychic potential, thus making him vastly more powerful in raw sci psionic strength. Strife has returned multiple times across Marvel's timelines, often leading militant factions like the Mutant Liberation Front and attempting to destabilize mutant kind through assassination, cloning, and bioterrorism. Despite his near Omega-level abilities and thematic weight as a living embodiment of trauma, abandonment, and destiny gone wrong, Strife is barely spoken about, and that's kinda sad. Holocaust! Holocaust, aka Nemesis, is most notably tied to the infamous dystopian reality known as the Age of Apocalypse. He first appeared in X-Men Alpha and quickly became one of Apocalypse's deadliest horsemen, serving as his executioner and enforcer in a world where Apocalypse rules North America and mutants dominate over humans. In the Age of Apocalypse universe, Holocaust is actually the son of Apocalypse, who is bred to be a living weapon. Encased in a crystalline containment armor to hold his volatile energy form together, he literally radiates destruction. As his name suggests, Holocaust was responsible for wiping out entire mutant factions and committing large-scale massacres in the name of Apocalypse's philosophy of survival of the fittest. One of his most brutal acts was the annihilation of the human resistance at the Pens and his murder of the Scarlet Witch, which left a deep impact on characters like Magneto. During the Age of Apocalypse, Holocaust battles Magneto and the Rebel X-Men in some of the timeline's most violent encounters. However, when he's pulled into the main Marvel universe during the end of the AOA saga, Holocaust becomes a man out of time, but still full of rage and twisted ideology. He attempts to carve out his own legacy in a world where Apocalypse hasn't won and clashes with X-Force, X-Man, and Cable, continuing to spread chaos in the name of mutant supremacy and his father's philosophy. Despite not being as prominent in recent years, Holocaust remains one of the most dangerous embodiments of the Age of Apocalypse's brutality and a reminder of what the world could become if the X-Men fail. Dark Beast! The Dark Beast, aka Dr. Henry McCoy of the Age of Apocalypse timeline, is a morally bankrupt version of the X-Men's beloved bouncing beast. Introduced in X-Men Alpha, Dark Beast is a sadistic geneticist who, unlike his Earth 616 counterpart, embraced cruelty, experimentation, and eugenics under the rule of Apocalypse. In the AOA universe, he served as Apocalypse's head scientist, performing horrific experiments on humans and mutants alike in the name of evolution. Where the original Beast sought knowledge to help others, Dark Beast pursued it without restraint, making him one of the most dangerous minds in any universe. At the end of the Age of Apocalypse, when the timeline was collapsing, Dark Beast escaped into the main Marvel universe years before the events of AOA were discovered by the X-Men. There, he operated in secret, even impersonating the real Beast for a time, studying mutant genetics and conducting secret experiments in the sewers of New York. He played a key role in the creation and manipulation of the Morlocks, who were underground mutants often treated as outcasts. But eventually, he was exposed, and since then, he's been a recurring villain in various X-Men titles. Mastermind! Jason Wingard. Mastermind is one of those X-Men villains who rarely gets the credit he deserves, even though he played a crucial role in one of the most iconic stories in Marvel history, the Dark Phoenix saga. He's often seen as a secondary player when compared to bigger names in the Hellfire Club or the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but that really undersells his impact. It was Mastermind, after all, who was tasked by the Hellfire Club to manipulate Jean Grey as part of his initiation into their inner circle. And we know how it worked a bit too well because ultimately, his mental tampering played a direct role in triggering her transformation into the Dark Phoenix. Ironically, that success backfired because Jean's power spiral scared the club so much that they rejected his membership and kicked him out entirely. Still, Mastermind didn't fade into obscurity, and he stayed a persistent thorn in the side of the X-Men, especially Cyclops and Wolverine, and even caused trouble in their personal lives by sabotaging future relationships. He went toe-to-toe with Rachel Summers, who was another Phoenix host, and while he eventually died from the legacy virus, his legacy as a manipulative and dangerous telepath is somewhat forgotten. Mastermind may not have the flashiness of Magneto or the brute strength of Juggernaut, but he was one of the most quietly devastating threats the X-Men ever faced. It's a shame he doesn't get more recognition, because without him, the Dark Phoenix saga and arguably the entire modern story arc of the X-Men might not have happened. Graden Creed. Posing as a German spy named Lenny Zauber, Mystique once seduced freelance assassin Victor Creed, aka Sabretooth, while he was in Germany on a mission. She later gave birth to a normal human child whom she named Graden, and then gave him up for adoption while still keeping an eye on him. Unfortunately, after finding out that his parents were both mutants and had abandoned him, Graden became resentful of all mutants. As an adult, he formed an evil group called the Friends of Humanity that dedicated itself to opposing mutant civil rights by committing acts of terrorism against peaceful mutants and mutant sympathizers, as well as using the acts of violent mutants such as Magneto to rally support for their cause. Now, this may be a tad misleading, but Creed was assassinated in 2010 by Mystique during his presidential campaign, but he has since been resurrected as a human sentinel. In classic X-Men fashion, it's more complicated than that, but classic Graden Creed made a great foil for the X-Men. We are sure plenty of X-Men the Animated Series fans may remember him fondly as well, but he hasn't shown up in quite a while now, so maybe Marvel should take the hint and make it happen. Sugarman! The Sugarman is easily one of the X-Men's most bizarre and disturbing villains, who's originally from the Age of Apocalypse timeline. First appearing in Generation Next Issue 2, he served as Apocalypse's brutal geneticist and torturer-in-chief. With 4 arms, a grotesquely long tongue, and a warped sense of humor, Sugarman oversaw horrific experiments on humans, breeding mutant weapons, and enforcing Apocalypse's rule through fear and biological horror. But during the collapse of the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Sugarman escaped into the main Marvel universe, where he quietly established himself as a genetic manipulator. He then infiltrated Genosha, secretly helping to shape its mutant oppressive systems and conducting unethical experiments. Sugarman was also tied to the creation of mutant growth hormone and has clashed with various X-Men teams over the years, particularly in titles like Excalibur, X-Man, and X-Force. What makes Sugarman unique is his mix of sadism, scientific brilliance, and origin from a timeline where evil won. But despite his unsettling presence and major behind-the-scenes influence, he's often overshadowed by more prominent foes. Bolasco! Bolasco is a powerful black sorcerer and demon lord in Marvel Comics who's famous for his dark ties to the X-Men and his role as the ruler of Limbo, a hellish pocket dimension filled with chaotic demons. First appearing in Kazar the Savage, issue 11, Bolasco is deeply connected to magic and mutant kind. His most famous connection is to Illyana Rasputin, aka Magic, the younger sister of Colossus. In one of his most pivotal arcs, Bolasco kidnaps young Illyana and brings her to Limbo, intending to corrupt her soul and use her as a vessel to summon the Elder Gods, who are ancient beings of unimaginable evil. Over the years, which pass rather rapidly in Limbo, he grooms Illyana in dark sorcery, forging her into a powerful sorceress. Though she eventually overthrows him and becomes ruler of Limbo herself, Bolasco never truly disappears. He later returns to reclaim his throne and challenge both Magic and the X-Men again and again, often using his demons, his magic, and his influence over the twisted versions of time and space. Sauron! Sauron is one of the more unique and underrated villains in the X-Men's rogues list. First appearing in X-Men issue 59, he's actually a living vampire, just not the blood-sucking kind, one who drains the life energy of others in order to survive. His most striking aspect is his appearance, which is a horrifying hybrid of a man and a dinosaur as a result of a mutant strain of pterosaur DNA that transformed him. With superhuman strength, hypnotic powers, and the ability to fly, he really is a serious threat, even if he doesn't get as much spotlight as some of the bigger named villains. He's been battling the X-Men since the Silver Age, but because he's so closely tied to the Savage Land, he doesn't show up often. That's part of why he tends to fly under the radar, despite being so visually iconic and powerful. If the MCU ever decides to explore the Savage Land in film or on Disney+, we think Sauron would be a perfect addition, as he's visually wild, thematically strange, and deeply rooted in X-Men history. He may not be a household name, but he actually kind of named himself after one, since when he became a villain, he decided to steal his name from the Lord of the Rings. Yeah, really. Donald Pierce. So, Donald Pierce is a long-standing villain in the X-Men universe, known for his deep hatred of mutants and his transformation from a wealthy bigot into a powerful cyborg enforcer. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 132 as a member of the Hellfire Club, where he served as the White Bishop. Unlike many in the Inner Circle who saw mutants as tools to be manipulated, Pierce outright despised them and believed in human superiority. When his hatred became too overt, even the Hellfire Club expelled him. After being defeated by the X-Men and nearly killed, Pierce was rebuilt with cybernetic enhancements, transforming him into a deadly half-man, half-machine. From there, he became the leader of the Reavers, a team of cyborg mercenaries dedicated to hunting and killing mutants. Under his leadership, the Reavers became some of the X-Men's most brutal enemies, especially targeting Wolverine, whom they captured and crucified in one of the darkest moments in Uncanny X-Men history. His character was also adapted for the big screen in 2017's Logan, where he was portrayed by Boyd Holbrook as the lead enforcer for the mutant hunting Reavers, which was a more grounded modern take on the character in a rather charming, cruel, and chilling way. Black Tom Cassidy. First appearing in X-Men 99, Black Tom Cassidy's real name is Thomas Samuel Eamon Cassidy. Initially, Tom was portrayed as a traditional villain with a criminal streak and a deep grudge against his cousin Banshee, but what truly made him stand out early on was his partnership with the Juggernaut, forming one of the most memorable villain duos in X-Men history. At first, Black Tom had the ability to generate concussive blasts through wood, often using a shillelagh as his weapon, but after being severely injured, he underwent a radical transformation, mutating further into a plant-like being, giving him control over vegetation and the ability to spread his consciousness through organic material. This change made him even more dangerous and unpredictable, as he was now able to manipulate entire environments and regrow himself from a single spore or vine. Tom has clashed with various X-Men teams, including the original X-Men, Generation X, and Deadpool, often using his powers in unsettling body horror-esque ways. But in recent years, Black Tom has taken a surprising turn. On the mutant island of Krakoa, he served as one of the nation's protectors, using his connection to the island's plant life as a security system and ecological manager. It's a redemption arc of sorts, but he's still gruff and morally gray while being better aligned with the mutant cause. Mask. Mask is one of the more disturbing villains in the X-Men universe, who's closely tied to the underground mutant community known as the Morlocks. First appearing in Uncanny X-Men issue 169, Mask has the grotesque power to reshape the flesh of others, while often distorting their faces and bodies against their will. This power isn't just cosmetic either. It's a permanent and incredibly painful transformation, making Mask more of a body horror character than a traditional supervillain. Initially a follower of Callisto, Mask's bitter, controlling nature eventually led to a power grab, and he took over leadership of the Morlocks after the mutant massacre. Under his rule, the Morlocks became more militant, and Mask used his powers as a tool of fear and dominance, often punishing allies and enemies alike through forced disfigurement. He has clashed with the X-Men multiple times over the decades, especially in stories involving mutant outcasts. Mask has even attempted to create his own version of mutant society by remaking mutants in his own image, believing he was helping them evolve. His ability to switch genders and appearances further intensifies his unsettling presence. While never a top-tier villain, Mask's deeply personal brand of horror makes him a lasting and chilling threat in mutant lore. Destiny. Destiny has had a major resurgence in the X-Men comics of late, especially with her return from the dead in the Inferno miniseries. With her ability to see the future, Destiny isn't just another villain, but someone who can anticipate every move, making her an unnerving threat to the X-Men. But for years, she was more of a background villain, despite her deep connections to major characters. Beyond her powers, Destiny is also the wife of Mystique, the mother of Nightcrawler, and the adoptive mother of Rogue. Her resurrection didn't just change the game in terms of plot, it recentered her as a key player in mutant politics. Saturnine. Opal Luna Saturnine is easily one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel multiverse, and with the MCU diving deeper into multiversal storytelling, her debut feels almost inevitable. She's the omniversal Majestrix, or basically the cosmic overseer of the entire multiverse, and she leads the Captain Britain Corps, which is a group tasked with protecting it all. We've already seen a version of Captain Britain in the form of Captain Carter in What If, and she's expected to show up again in live action. That certainly opens the door for Saturnine to step in too. In the comics, she tends to stay in the background even during major events like X of Swords, but her influence is huge. If she does appear in the MCU, it will likely be the first time we really see just how powerful and essential she is. Marvelous verdict! Well, that's our top 20 picks for the most underrated villains to go up against the X-Men. Do you think we missed out on any important characters? Let us know your top choices in the comment box down below. We're always looking for ideas for new videos. And, as always, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.